It is my heartfelt belief that every human being enters this world with a reason of existence. Very few discover it early, some late, and many might never do. At the age of 12, I discovered that this world is undergoing a giant transition and wanted to know what my role could be. I realized that we as a generation have a critical role to play because once such a realization enters the human heart, it ignites a flame and it starts to restlessly burn and never leaves. Today I would like to take you on a journey and ask a trinity of questions. How did we get to where we are? What is the state of our world in the 21st century? And how can we co-create a future most beneficial for all? If you would travel across the universe and an ancient legacy through the formation of the Earth of 4.6 billion years, we would only come into the story after bacteria, fungi, plant, animal kingdom, and then us human beings. If you would imagine this walk as a walk of 4.6 miles, as the Deep Time Walk reflects, then we would be only the last 20 centimeters of this walk. On the length of an arm, this would be your fingertip. More strikingly, the Industrial Revolution is the last 150 years, which is 1/5 of a millimeter in which we cause the amount of mass destruction and geological impact that we're facing right now. It is clear that we live in such turbulent times, socially, economically, ecologically, and also on a level of loss of meaning and purpose in our human societies. This presents us both with unprecedented crises as well as opportunities if we transform them into a future we're capable of. Peter Drucker reflects that every few hundred years in history there occurs a sharp transformation. Within a few short decades, society, its worldview, its basic values, its social and political structures, its arts, its key institutions rearranges itself. We're currently living through such a time. In that spirit, the cultural historian Thomas Berry reflects that throughout the course of human history, we always had a story to make sense of the spirit of time, to understand our world and to find a collective sense of direction to navigate into our future. It is clear that our old story is dying and our new story has not been born yet. We're in between the stories, we're in a rite of passage. In our human development, we're just pubers trying to become mature, which is a painful process. That brings a burning question. What is then the story of our time? And what is the role of young people in defining that story? What is the story of my generation, the Millennial Generation? If you are between 18 till 35 years, you're considered to be a millennial. You don't only compose more than half of the current world population of 7.4 billion strong, but you're expected to comprise 75% of the global workforce in 2025. According to this recent KPMG CEO Outlook, you will be among the 4 top CEO concerns for the years to come in terms of your differing needs and wants about how to engage the millennial workforce better. This means that you're coming of age and you are inevitable in your growing significance in redefining that story. But also to partake in this process as collaborators and architects in the future prospects of our world. Of course, it's important to mention that this story is not only about my generation, but it concerns all generations. And also for stakeholders, what we see nowadays is that talent walks away in businesses, large corporations, institutions, because millennial leaders, young professionals feel misunderstood. And they think that they have a different mindset, which generates an intergenerational divide. To understand these dimensions better and explore these questions, I've been on a long, lifelong learning journey. In the last few years, I was very fortunate to have a liberal arts and sciences background, and I was exposed to interdisciplinary learning. I participated in global leadership programs across 28 countries, through 6 continents, through youth leadership networks and summits and many world communities sector-wide. Everything converged together at the Rio Plus 20 summit in the historical year of 2012, when 50,000 people gathered to decide on the future of our planet. This was a very important point for me in time, because I identified 2 major needs. The first one was parallel to an inventory I started to make, which was affirmed by Paul Hawken's book, Blessed Unrest, in which he identifies already in 2007 that right now there are at least 1 million initiatives in the world working towards social and sustainable development sector-wide. This is the largest social and sustainable movement of all times, but it's fragmented and decentralized. It has no leader, no name, no location. And the question is, how do we bring these capacities together to enhance visibility and facilitate intergenerational, synergized collaboration? I started a global network of networks that tries to explore this, called Synergized Earth Network. The second major need I identified was to shed evidence-based and social scientific light on who millennial leaders are, what their characteristics are, what their mindset is, and what causes this intergenerational divide, ultimately what their role would be in defining this new story and so-called paradigm. Throughout my fieldwork and speaking to 4,500 millennial leaders, future decision makers, young professionals, and change agents in more than 140 countries, whereby many also participated in my surveys, whereby I generated quantitative and qualitative data, a very insightful exploration revealed itself. Millennial leaders, change agents, young professionals reveal that the current social, economical, ecological crisis has a crisis of values underneath it. This reflects itself back in the current dominant worldview, as well as the current dominant so-called paradigm and story. Also in leadership and organizations, we see this, and they perceive this as highly dysfunctional because it's part of the business as usual paradigm. It's highly hierarchical, authoritarian, based on command, control, and power dynamics, and self-interest. They suggest strongly an alternative paradigm, an alternative story, an alternative leadership agenda. We don't know what this is yet, although, for instance, leadership development is one of the oldest fields, and it has evolved all the way till the 21st century through great thinkers like Plato and Aristoteles. Although there are many explorations, there's still not a converged enough debate happening yet to define a future leadership agenda. What millennial leaders, young professionals reveal is that we need to look for this agenda and value-based approaches. Although there are many stereotypes around millennials, like being narcissist, lazy, tech-dependent. On the contrary, I've found many characteristics that are already also known, such as a generation of being globally oriented, digital natives, valuing the importance of work-life balance, being entrepreneurial, innovative, and creative. But most importantly, that value-based leadership that enhances self-empowerment processes and a sense of autonomy, and that enhancing lifelong learning to enable this is key. You might ask here, what does lifelong learning mean then? I mean, there are many definitions, like learning throughout a lifetime, self-directed, self-motivated learning, adult education, homeschooling, but also learning new skills to catch up with the demanding changes of the workforce, like in the face of automation. But what lifelong learning means here can be characterized by the identity flame, which is inspired by Bill Isaacs and the Art of Thinking Foundation. If you would imagine this flame, the first layer would be the essence of a person, an idea, or an organization. Around that, you build your character, your value system, your principles, everything that you need to carry this core out. In a simplified way, this would be what you are. Around that, you build your skills, your capabilities, your talent, your acumen, everything that you need to function in this world. Around that, you build your actions. Hopefully, these are your conscious choices, and eventually your results. In a simplified way, this would be what you do. Our societies, workplaces, schools nowadays are very much focused on these last three layers. But whether you grow from the inside to the outside or the outside to the inside, what you strive towards is alignment. What does alignment mean then? In my understanding and exploration, it means to make a personal commitment and promise to yourself to become the best and truest version you can be. To find a sense of purpose, to unleash your creativity, to thrive in your talents, to excel in your fields of occupation, and from there make a contribution to the world around you. Whether this is your family, your campus, your workplace, or the society at large. This reveals an identical insight in my exploration, especially in my fieldwork and conversations with many millennials, in which they affirm that before we can serve others and the world around us, we need to practice what we preach, walk the talk, and live and breathe and embody this as a lifestyle in how we raise our children, how we consume, how we carry ourselves, how we communicate with others. Because when we do so, we cultivate the quality of our presence and our lives, and we're naturally in service to the world around us. But the quest of our time is about how do we bring this remembrance, these individuals and capacities then together. This is not easy because it requires us to unlearn and unbecome and empty ourselves from everything that we're not, to learn to distinguish. It requires us to develop a sense of a compass to navigate through the trials and tribulations and triumphs of our lives while keeping up with our daily commitments and responsibilities. This is not easy to do this in balance and not become the burnout generation, as there are many reflections around it as well. What I often see is a divide between many millennial leaders, change agents, young professionals being either very purpose-driven and value-based or very output-driven and result-based. How do we reconcile these two qualities that we're capable of? How do we align our inner and outer development? How do we bring the right and left hemisphere of our brains together? How do we bring our soft and hard skills together? Can this flame being at the center of lifelong learning and lifelong learning being at the center of our schools, universities, and educational institutions be the pathway to enhance this? Can we place lifelong learning at the heart of our lives while seeing our lives as the classroom constantly is another burning question that this brings. Why this is so important is because already in 1972, by the authors of The Limits to Growth and the founders of the Club of Rome, we have seen that the forecasts they've made about where we would stand today in 2017 are unfortunately alarmingly accurate. It even forecasts that mass destruction will grow for the years to come. Also, the recent Big History Conference, a scientific field that looks at these big questions of our times, reveals that one of the major insights to get out of this transition and to survive as human species is to acknowledge that our technological advancement is a manifestation of how far we have evolved as human species, but our moral development has not grown hand in hand with it. Therefore, perhaps the new story is maybe not one that we need to redefine, but perhaps it's about the revival of remembrance of that what we have forgotten, because we have drifted so far away from the innate human experience, from what it means to be human and alive. Perhaps if we remember this and allow that flame to be ignited within each one of us, then the new story can burst through us. One thing is for sure, we can certainly not do this alone, and my generation cannot fulfill its potential if the generations before us don't do so. Therefore, my invitation to the world is, regardless of your age, your gender, your political religious, ideological background, your sexual orientation. Let us join forces. Let us join our hearts, our heads, and our hands to come together across generations and sectors, to put this flame at the center of our schools, of our workplaces, of our lives, and of our world. Why this is so important? Because you as a millennial cannot discredit what generations before us have done. Try to honor and build upon the legacies, the wisdom, the know-how, the expertise and experiences that's out there by those who walked the path before us. If you're above 35 years, try to stand on equal grounds with the younger generation. Try to understand them and be mutual mentors for them. Try to join forces with them. If you are a stakeholder, no matter what sector you operate in, try to shift the current debate on millennials that is mostly focused on retention and recruitment and optimizing talent strategy and branding towards resilience, so that we as a generation can equip ourselves to become resilient in the face of the challenges we're facing right now. Why this is so key is, as the great mystic and philosopher Mevlana Rumi reflects, throughout our lifetimes, from cradle to grave, we're given an opportunity, a limited, precious time. And we as human beings, like silkworms, become butterflies. Out of the 1,001 possibilities and probabilities, have a chance to choose for a life that we're born for, that we are particularly designed for. And our quest in life is, as he says, to go and find our belonging. Let us find our individual and collective belonging. Let us realize our human potential. Let us restore our relationships with ourselves, from there with each other and our earth. Because if we are the people, and if these are the times, and if it's not us, who then? If it's not now, when? Thank you.